Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Casual Criminalist. As always, I'm your host Simon. I'm here, one of my writers in this case, Matt, has written me a special Halloween episode. I'm recording this on like the 25th. The odds of us getting this out before Halloween, Matt, I'm really sorry. It's been on my recording docket for ages. I didn't realize it was a Halloween special, and here we are. So my apologies. You probably also get an apology from me via email. Unless we magically getting it out on time. But I don't know if that's going to happen, my dude. Anyway, the format of the show, I read it. Never read it before. Let's jump in. The Devil Made Me Do It. The Trial of Arne Johnson. Who here likes scary movies? I'll answer that question, Matt. Not really. I mean, sort of. I have a weird relationship with scary movies because it's like I like being, a scary movie. There's like, something to that. But then also when I'm watching a scary movie, I'm like, why did I do this to myself? I'm just going to go to bed and think I can see dead people. What the fuck? Dude, I saw The Ring when I was a kid. And I was scared of looking at screens for weeks. Ever since I was a teenager, horror and thriller movies have been a couple of my favorite film genres, from the old classics like Dracula, Frankenstein, and The Invisible Man, to the slasher flicks like Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, and Scream. Of those movies, I think I've only seen Scream. To modern frights like Sinister, Insidious, and A Quiet Place. I don't think I've seen any of those. Look, there are plenty of movies to haunt your nightmares with, especially during Halloween season. Hell, I remember to this day the first time I watched the 1941 movie The Wolf Man. I was about 10 years old and was visiting my aunt and uncle. According to my aunt, I was shaking so much that the whole bed was moving, but since then I've come to truly appreciate the art of a good scare and just how creative you have to be to spook an entire audience. With that said, let's for a moment talk about some of my favorite movies. Okay, The Conjuring films. Here I was, thought we were doing a true crime podcast, Matt, but apparently we're just diving into your history with horror movies. That's all right. The Conjuring films. The first of the films, The Conjuring, was released on July the 19th, 2013, and was directed by iconic horror director James Wan, the man behind classics such as Insidious and Saw. I've seen Saw. I don't think I've seen The Conjuring. These are movies that I'll see trailers for and I'll be like, oh yeah, that looks really exciting and scary. And then I'll never see because I just don't want to be scared. It's like, and going to see them in the cinema, it's never quite as scary as watching them by yourself at home. At night. You're like, I don't like it. The film was a smash hit with critics at the box office and is still considered to be one of the best horror films of the 21st century. This success spawned a series of movies, including 2 sequels, with 1 more currently in development and 2 spin-off series, those being The Annabelle and The Nun films. So why do I bring... I've heard of these. These are definitely, like I say, the ones that I see the trailers for and then never watch. So why do I bring these films up? Well, not only do I love them wholeheartedly, but their subject matter is at the heart of this case. They follow the obviously dramatized experiences of the late Ed and Lorraine Warren. They were self-proclaimed demonologists and paranormal investigators who claimed to have helped many people get rid of the supernatural entities that were plaguing them. Ed and Lorraine were married in 1945 and went on to found the New England Society for Psychic Research, or NESPR, in 1952, which would go on to become the oldest ghost hunting group in New England. The couple claimed to have investigated over 10,000 cases of paranormal phenomena and authored many books on the subject, as well as held many interviews, talks, and lectures regarding their studies and their cases. These people are always like, wow, you made a career out of nothing. Look, I'm not judging, I make YouTube videos for a living, but come on. Ghosts? Come on. These cases include the possession of a Raggedy Ann doll called Annabelle, the Perron family haunting, the Amityville Horror, and the Enfield Poltergeist. All cases which have been adapted into film. They even ran a museum, the Warrens Occult Museum, which was only closed to the public in 2019, and housed many supposed haunted and cursed objects, including the Annabelle doll itself. Now, we can't prove that demons and ghosts exist. No, definitely can't. And I assume Simon has rolled his eyes at least 10 times in this video already. You're goddamn right. Obviously, the subject is up for debate. Not in my mind. You gotta prove it. You gotta prove it. There's no debate. Like, I don't have to disprove ghosts. You have to prove them. And the validity of all the cases the Warrens investigated are subject to skepticism. Many don't believe in ghosts. Many don't believe in demons. And while in the movies the Warrens are portrayed as heroic and benevolent protagonists, many have criticized them, saying that they used these incidents for money or notoriety. No, they would never. Regardless of how real the incidents were, though, and regardless of whether Ed and Lorraine Warren were the real deal or not, Lorraine legitimately claimed to be clairvoyant, by the way, there's a special case that still makes heads tilt to this day, one that took the country by storm, making folks ask the question, can a man truly be guilty of murder if he was possessed by a demon? Well, he wasn't possessed by a demon, so let's just put that, get rid of that immediately. So the question is, we're like looking at insanity or diminished responsibility or something, aren't we? To see whether his mental condition means that he's not guilty of murder, because he's not possessed by a demon, and if the courts say he is, I'll be very disappointed in the courts. The year was 1981, the place was Connecticut, and a man was dead. A man was arrested, an investigation was launched, the Warrens got involved, and he was brought to trial. What was the result? And was the accused truly possessed by a dark force at the time of the crime, or was he simply a cold-blooded killer like so many we've covered on this channel to this point? On this year's Cash Crim Halloween Spooktacular, maybe it's coming out in like mid-November, who knows? It's our job to answer those questions, and all questions leading up to that. So grab your candy and pumpkin spice drinks as we descend into the darkness and spin the tale that would inspire the third Conjuring film and see if murder is murder if the devil made him do it. It is! This is the story of the strange trial of Arne Johnson. The possession of David Glatzel. Okay, with all that groundwork in place, let's talk about the initial incident that kicked off the events that we're discussing today. The year was 1980, and a dark entity was haunting the Glatzel family. At first, they were an all-loving, religious family, one that you wouldn't think twice about if you were to pass them on the street. Carl and Judy Glatzel seemed to be loving parents, and their children all appeared to be normal, including their daughter Debbie and their son, Carl Jr. Really? Isn't there like a burger place called Carl Jr.? Carl's Jr.? Alan and 11-year-old David Glatzel. In the Netflix documentary, The Devil on Trial, David, now in his 50s, spoke of his childhood. When I was 11 years old, I was quiet. Life was good. Playing with my brothers. Best time of my life. Back then, I wouldn't call us an all-American family, but I would say we were as normal can be. What is an all-American family? What's the difference between that and a normal family? All-American family, I imagine them wearing like sports clothes, white picket fence, a dog. That's about it. What makes this? Driving a truck? Things were going well. That is, until the 2nd of July 1980, when Debbie Glatzel started house hunting and found a place to rent in Newtown, Connecticut. You see, she and her boyfriend, Arne Johnson, planned on getting married later that spring and were preparing to move in together. Of course, it was bittersweet for the Glatzels to see Debbie go, but life goes on and they understood that she wished to move forward in her life with Arne, and so, being the loving family that they were, they agreed to help clean the place up and help Debbie and Arne move in. This all sounds so normal. This all sounds so nice. It's the sort of thing I imagine I'll be doing with my kids in a few years, which makes me sad, but also like, God, it's crazy how quickly it goes. My kid's now 5, and I just remember that it seems like it was yesterday that I didn't have kids at all. And then like, I'm already like, over a quarter of the way through before she moves out? It's so weird. It's so weird. I look at my parents and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be a grandparent before I know it. It's fucking weird, dude. I feel like I still say dude. Like, what the fuck? As soon as they arrived, they all experienced an odd feeling. According to David, it was a weird house. There was just something really off about it. Regardless, the family started to clean, removing clutter and sweeping up dirt and dust. David went out upstairs to sweep out one of the rooms when, according to him, even to this very day, he claims he was accosted by something, quoting again, "I was in the bedroom on my own, but I could feel something, and then I was pushed backwards onto the bed. I saw this image. It looked like the devil from a Halloween costume. His eyes were black, solid black, just like a chunk of coal, and it scared me." I'll give him this. Real or not, that is some spooky shit. Yes, it is. David ran out of the house after that and begged his family to take him home. While sitting around the dinner table that night, they asked him what had happened. He told them everything, even said that the entity had told him that he wanted his soul and that he would come for David. Typical demonic stuff, nothing odd about that. No, the whole thing's pretty honest. Like, yeah, no, I was in this house, then I fell over on the bed and a demon told me that it's going to harvest my soul. Of course, his family didn't believe him, and Arne even jokingly asked David if he had gotten into the medicine cabinet and taken some pills that he shouldn't have, but David was adamant that what he'd seen was real. This continued for months, with David claiming to have visions. Most of them involved the visage of a ghostly old man who would push and scare David, but said he would not harm his family under one condition: that all the family moved together into the rental home, which they eventually did. Wait, so the whole family's just moving into the kid's new house that she's found with her boyfriend? That's a bit weird. Are they listening to crazy David, who's saying about the demons? He's like, guys, we have to move into the house together because of the demons. They're like, okay, David, Jesus Christ, we'll move into the house together. I mean, we don't want to have our souls harvested, do we? Why they listen to the odd ramblings of an 11 years old? 11-year-old? I don't know. But it might have had something to do with the sudden changes in David's behavior, as well as the cuts and bruises that covered his body. None of his family... He needs to go to a psychiatrist and talk to a social worker. That's what he needs to do right now. It's not demons! None of his family members ever saw the old man, but they did hear noises in the attic. I personally chalk it up to mice or the house settling, but that's just me. They even claimed that one night after David woke up screaming bloody murder, the entire house began to shake as if it had been struck by an earthquake. It was only after that incident, and after speaking with their neighbor who claimed to know a thing or two about the supernatural, that the Glatzel family decided to get in touch with the Warrens. At this point, Ed and Lorraine Warren were already famous for their work at the Amityville house. For those unaware, at 3 a.m. on November the 13th, 1974, Ronald DeFeo Jr. was brutally executed by his parents and his 4 younger siblings with a .35 caliber lever-action Marlin 336C rifle while they slept. Holy shit. I don't think that's executed. That's just fucking murder, dude. Executed makes it sound so clinical. Almost like there's a professionalism behind it, but this is just like straight up fucking murder, dudes. The Lutz family moved into the house in December 1975, a year after the murders took place, but only stayed there for 28 days before fleeing the house. The family later claimed that the house was haunted by the spirits of the murdered DeFeos and another evil entity, one that perhaps compelled Ronald DeFeo Jr. to do what he did. Spooky stuff, and perhaps something worth covering in another Halloween special. Regardless, the Warrens and a group of other paranormal investigators spent some time investigating the Amityville house in 1976, and that brought them worldwide attention. They appeared in interviews and on talk shows across the nation, and it was in the middle of this hoopla that Debbie reached out to them. They agreed to come to see David, while also bringing along a doctor to see if David was suffering from some form of mental illness instead of it being ghost-related. Holy shit! Fucking respect! That's really unusual. Sounds sensible enough to me, but at the end of the testing, David was given a clean bill of health, and both physically and psychologically. I mean, but it's not possible. There's something psychologically wrong with him, unless he's just making it all up. He is 11 years old. He is 11. Kids make shit up for no reason. Like, they'll just lie. It's like, why you lie? Just like, I don't know, I thought it'd be fun. It's just got no reason. Because he's a kid. He's just making shit up. He's 11. I'll give it to Ed and Lorraine. Putting all the detractors and skeptics aside, they seemed like sensible people. The Gladsels were scared, and Judy just wanted them to help her son. She simply wanted things to stop and for everything to go back to normal, and simply wanted her family back. Ed and Lorraine did all they could to make Judy and the rest of the Glatzel family feel at ease. They took every precaution to see if this was something physical or mental with David, and they were hesitant to say this was a possession or a haunting until they experienced something themselves. After some more trials and tests, Ed and Lorraine became convinced that it wasn't a ghost, but a demonic entity that had attached itself to David Glatzel. Ed warned them all, given what he had told him and what he had seen, that David was likely in an advanced stage of the haunting process, one where he would likely soon be acting differently than he normally would, that he would become more vulgar and volatile. I mean, if you're telling him this, then he's 11. He's gonna take that on board and become more vulgar and volatile. It's just gonna be an excuse for him to swear. He told them that they needed to document everything that happened to them and gather as much evidence as possible to take to the Archbishop to get an exorcism approved. And so the family bought a recorder and a camera to document everything that happened, and soon enough, what Ed predicted came to be. Soon, David started experiencing blackouts, during which he would scream and laugh and growl and curse. Yeah, just like I said. They said he's going to do this, and so he does it. Come on. He would fight his family. He'd try to choke his mother and sister. He would act like someone was choking the life out of him. He called his mother a douchebag and a cocksucker. Hey, Mom, you douchebag. No, I'm possessed by a demon, you cocksucker. It's a demon. I can't control myself. It's a demon, you bitch. He threatened to kill them all with a knife, and these fits allegedly would last from minutes to hours. The family did their best to restrain him, keep him under control, and try to bring him to his senses. They used crosses and rosaries, they said prayers that Jesus loved him, but nothing worked. According to David, quote, "I remember being choked, but I don't remember anything else when I blacked out, or even if I blacked out, or what happened. Nobody could ever answer that." Do I believe that David was possessed? Logically, no, I don't. But I'll be lying if I wasn't intrigued. Yeah, I'm intrigued. It's interesting, like a little psychological thing with an 11-year-old there. It's just attention-seeking, in my opinion, but that's it. Maybe this is me just being a lover of horror and the supernatural, but things involving demons and ghosts and the like always hold my attention, even if it's most likely nonsense. Which it is! Eventually, enough evidence was brought before the church. A cardinal himself came to meet the family, and an exorcism was ordered. On the 20th of September, 1980, the Glatzel family and Arne arrived at their local church to meet with the Warrens and the priests. The exorcism was performed, and David needed to be held down to the floor for it to be finished. He reportedly growled and hissed, twisted, and thrashed about. He tried to attack the priest in charge, Father Vergelak, and he called him all sorts of names before being held down. It got to the point where David began to turn blue, his tongue swelled, and soon he was unable to breathe. And that's when Arne stepped in. I yelled at this thing to the top of my lungs. I said, "Leave this little kid alone. Take me on. I'm here. Take me on." I felt this coldness come over me. Ice cold. Lorraine said, "Oh my God, what did you do?" After that, everything seemed to fade away. David's behavior returned to normal. There was no more strange occurrences, and it seemed that one way or another the exorcism had worked. Things in the Glatzel house returned to normal, and David seemed to be okay. Quoting him again, "I remember I was happy. I spent a lot of time just playing outside, trying to be a good kid, be the sort of good boy of the family." Soon after the exorcism of David Glatzel, Ed and Lorraine went to the police. Glenn Cooper was a detective at the time, and he recounted his encounter with the Warrens for the Devil on Trial series in great detail. Quote, "I was aware that there were strange things, demonic things, allegedly happening at the Glatzel house. Some of the police officers had gotten noise complaints there or something. I was a detective on duty, and Ed and Lorraine Warren came to the old police department on Grays Bridge Road. Ed Warren introduced himself as a demonologist, and Lorraine Warren introduced herself as a psychic. Lorraine was upset. She went on to tell me that during one of the actual exorcisms, Arne Johnson challenged the devil to leave David Glatzel and take him on. Lorraine was very upset about that. She says, "He should not have done that. You cannot do that. He does not know what he's up against." And she said, "I see serious injury or death with a knife." She wanted to put us on notice that a crime could occur. That she actually, I want to make it clear, she said, "I see this happening as a psychic." She was matter of fact. She didn't look bizarre. She didn't act bizarre. I thought she was relating what she really believed, and to her, it was real. And lo and behold, apparently it was real. Yeah, well, I mean, if you say it, so it be done. The beast strikes. But I hear what you must be saying. Well, Matt, that was a great story and it kept up with the spooky season, but this is an episode of Casual Criminalist, so where's the crime? Well, here it is. Things in the Glatzel house went back to normal. Everything was going well, and for several months things seemed pretty quiet. Debbie Glatzel and Arne Johnson were living together in a new apartment, and while Arne had a job at the Right Tree Service at the time, Debbie had taken a new job at the local kennels in Brookfield, Connecticut to help provide for the two of them. As a dog lover myself, it seems like a pretty fun job looking after all the pooches while their owners are away, feeding and grooming them all day long. While working there, yes, I'd hate this job. Just having to be around dogs all day, I'd be like half scared, half holding my nose, just like, oh no, don't take a shit there. I don't want to pick that up, no! While working there, she made fast friends with her boss and landlord, a man named Alan Bono. They became close, and Bono became friends with Arne as well. Things were looking up, and Debbie and Arne were looking forward to their upcoming wedding day. All sounds rather lovely, doesn't it? I'm sure Matt's about to ruin it. I mean, not Matt, but like history. And then it happened. It was February the 16th, 1981, 5 months after David's exorcism, and Arne wasn't feeling very good. He called out of work to relax and try and feel better, as they had plans later that night. When the time came to leave, Arne didn't feel too much better, but he went with Debbie to pick up his sisters, as they had planned to spend time together. They went and hung out with their landlord, Alan Bono, at his apartment, and they all had a few glasses of wine, as friends do. As time passed, Bono was getting more and more intoxicated, and Arne wanted to leave to get his sisters out of that environment. Now, if Arne is to be believed, he doesn't remember anything after he and Debbie began walking down the stairs to leave. He claims that his memory is a total blank on that day, that he blacked out. But from what has been documented, things escalated very quickly and it ended very badly. In the words of Detective Glenn Cooper, "I got a call from dispatch. I was told that there was a serious stabbing. We were calling all hands on deck. Deborah Glatzel told arriving police patrol units that Arne and Alan had been drinking. In the apartment, there was an argument and it developed into a physical fight. Ended out on the front lawn of the kennel about 13-15 feet from the front door. During this fight, Arne pulled a knife out that he had in his sheath and he repeatedly stabbed Alan Bono. Alan Bono fell, mortally wounded. Debbie Glatzel was very distraught, relayed that Arne took off to the woods and that she thought he was going to head to the family home on Oak Grove Road, which is not very far away. Arne Johnson had stabbed Alan Bono a total of 4 times with a 5-inch, 13-centimeter pocket knife, reportedly growling like an animal all the while. Each stab wound was within the chest and stomach region, clearly meant to cause fatal harm, which is exactly what they did. Arne then took off into the night and Debbie called the police as well as her family. David was petrified, believing that the demon had returned, that it had possessed Arne and was now after him again. Carl, Judy, and Carl Jr. all piled into the family truck and took off to the apartment to help Debbie, leaving David and their youngest son Alan at home. Wait, isn't he like 11 and the youngest son's even younger? Oh, the past. Carl Glatzel Jr. remembers that night very well, quoting, "The night of the murder, my dad and I were working outside and my mother screamed, 'We have to get down to the kennel, something happened, Debbie's hysterical.' We get there and Debbie's like, 'Oh, there was a bad fight. Alan got stabbed. He's over there.' I saw Alan laying on his side. That's when I went over to him and rolled him over." Keep in mind, I'm 15. I don't know what to do. I've never had to deal with this in my life, and I remember seeing the 4 stab wounds. It was 4. He was gasping for air. I just kept telling him, "Alan, hold on." So, what are you going to do? It's like you're stuck. You know what I'm saying? It's not like a feeling to, I don't ever talk about it, to be honest with you. It's something I don't want to remember because it was just something, you can't help somebody, It's like there was nothing I could do. It's just sad to see somebody die like that. End quote. Alan Bono was transported to the hospital, but he died from his injuries hours later. On the way to the hospital, Sergeant Gordon Fairchild of the Brookfield Police Department was helping escort the ambulance when he spotted someone walking alongside the road. It was Arne Johnson, dazed and confused, and he had blood all over his hands and shirt. He was arrested immediately on the charge of assault, though before the night was out, that charge would be raised to murder. Arne couldn't believe it, any of it. He had never been violent before. He had never hurt anyone before. He had never been arrested, and he claimed to have no memory of anything he'd done to Alan Bono. He told them they had the wrong guy. Nevertheless, he was charged and held for murder in the 1st degree. Definitely sounds like he's had some sort of mental breakdown, right? Just for someone with no history of violence to just snap like that? It's kind of crazy. Trial of the Devil. The media had a field day with the whole business of it. A man claiming that he had been possessed by the devil, and that's what made him kill a friend. Unheard of. Well, at least in the courts of America. Over in England, demonic possession has successfully been used as a defense on 3 different occasions. Twice on charges of arson and once on the charge of sexual assault. The Warrens were interviewed several times about the case, and they even allowed some of the tapes they took of David's possession to be played on the radio. A good number of people thought it was all nonsense, calling it an open and shut case, but many people believed it to be real, some even calling in and asking when they were going to play the haunting recordings again. I mean, I don't think it's an open and shut case, because there seems to be a very, very decent defense around insanity or like some kind of diminished responsibility, right? Martin Manella was Arne's lawyer, and at first he didn't believe either. It wasn't until he dove deep into the research of it all and spoke to Ed and Lorraine Warren that he came around to the idea. And he went full throttle with the defense that Arne was not himself at the time, that the demon that had possessed David had transferred itself to Arne during the exorcism and had made him kill Alan Bono. Martin's partners had even told him to stay away from the case, that the Warrens were nuts and fakes, but he believed them and the evidence that they had collected. I believed in the story, I believed in the defense, and I also believed there probably wasn't another lawyer in the state that would represent him with this defense. No, because it seems like a bad idea. You've got to persuade the judge to believe in demons. Just go for an insanity plea or something. October the 28th, 1981 was the day that Arne's trial began, and the defense was ready, as was the Glatzel family. Most of the family was ready to testify that what had happened with David had led to this. The Warrens were ready to testify with their knowledge of David's possession and all their evidence, and Martin had built this entire case around that defense. The prosecution was aiming for the maximum sentence, and they wanted to put Arne away for the rest of his days, which meant that he'd be staring down the barrel of 25 to life. The The defendant was confident, the family was confident, and they all knew that if Arne had to be found not guilty, they had all they needed to prove it. Until the judge said no. Judge Robert Callahan, in front of a packed courthouse, standing room only, listened to the plea of the defense, the plea of not guilty by reason of demonic possession, and he shot that down instantly. Good for you, judgy. He deemed such a defense to be nonsense, that it was not real provable science, that it had no bearing in this case, or any case in a US court, and that no evidence or testimony in regards to said defense would be heard or acknowledged by the court. I could practically hear Simon cheering from here. Yes, yes, yes! Good job, judge! I mean, what the fuck else is he supposed to do? To say that this was a slap in the face, a wake-up call for Arne, the Glatzel family, and Martin is an understatement. Surely they knew this was a high-risk strategy going into it. Their whole strategy was banking on their case of demonic possession, and it had just gone up in smoke right before their eyes. There were even priests from the church where the original exorcism took place there to witness the proceedings and perhaps aid in the defense. And once that ruling was made, they simply got up in silence and walked out of the courtroom, never to speak on this case again. To give them this, I do feel bad for them to a degree. Every time someone gets on the stand, they place their hand on the Bible and swear to tell the whole truth before God, and yet a defense in regard to the devil and demons was too fantastical. I mean, acknowledging God is okay, but the other side of the coin is too much. It sounds a bit two-faced to me. I think the hand on the Bible thing's just a bit of theater, right? Because it's like, obviously, you don't have to put your hand on the Bible. If you just say, no, I'm not going to do that, it doesn't mean you're suddenly not guilty of perjury. It's just a bit of theater. And I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of like atheists or any other religion that doesn't follow the Bible who have to do this in court, and it doesn't mean anything to them. In Arne's own words, in regards to his feelings at that moment, I felt abandoned, didn't have the chance to tell the whole truth, but they would never allow the truth, so I felt lost. What do we do now? Well, the next day came, and the defense needed a new strategy. The entirety of their case was down the tubes, especially when there were signed statements that Arne had in fact stabbed Alan Bono. So taking the proverbial left turn, they went with a case of self-defense in a last-ditch effort to save Arne's life, aiming for a charge of manslaughter instead of outright murder. This was an uphill. Really? What's wrong with the plea of it? It does seem like he just was out of his mind. This was an uphill battle from the get-go, as while it would be understandable that someone could stab someone once, perhaps twice, in the defense of oneself, stabbing them 4 times one after the other, it was harder to prove. The trial itself lasted about a month, with Arne getting on the stand and sticking with his story of not being able to remember a thing about the events of that night. A possible motive was also brought up, that being Debbie. In the words of Carl Glatzel Jr., quote, "There is nothing demonic in this. Arne was very possessive of Debbie. There were speculations and rumors that Debbie was having an affair with Alan Bono." Well then, you got your motive, don't you? You're beginning to look a lot less like a blackout when there's a motive. During the investigation, Debbie even admitted that she and Bono did have a relationship in the past, but that it was long over and had nothing to do with the case. Yeah, sure, Debbie, and I'm Linda Blair. With all of that said, the trial came to an end on the 24th of November 1981. After deliberating for 15 hours, the jury returned with their verdict, and perhaps not in the way that many believed they would. This strategy, as slapdash and hasty as it was, had actually worked. Arne remembers those pulse-pounding moments very well. "I was brought up to the courtroom. The room was filled. The judge came and he got the verdict from the foreman of the jury. I was very nervous and terrified. The verdict was not guilty of murder in the first degree, guilty of manslaughter in the first degree. Then we came to sentencing, and I remember Judge Callahan's words to this day. I have no alternative but to give you the maximum sentence allowed, 10 to 20 years to a maximum security prison." Arne Johnson, against overwhelming odds, had dodged the bullet. I think it's safe to say that hoping for a not guilty verdict was hoping against hope at this point. A man was dead, and devil or no devil, possession or no possession, justice had to be done, especially when a defense involving Arne's mental health was never even put on the table. Why? Why?
Why? Why? Why? Why? Why? Why? Why?
I think it might have been a way to get at least some of the possession evidence in front of a jury, but that's just my uneducated opinion. Yeah, right, why didn't they do this? I know that, obviously, if you get insanity, then they cart you off to a mental hospital, potentially forever. But this does seem like he was insane. Or temporarily insane, or whatever. But if I was the prosecution, I would definitely go down that line of, like, his girlfriend's having an affair with the person he killed. Because that sounds like, goddamn, like, okay, yeah, you had some drinks, and then you murdered him. In my opinion, allegedly. Not everyone was relieved with the lighter charge and sentence, though, as Arne recounts, when I was handed this sentence, Debbie jumped up and told the judge, "Callahan," she goes, "you're sick, you're insane." And then she just went running, crying. When I was exiting the courthouse, Debbie broke through the camera people, ran up to me to give me a kiss. And I told Debbie, I said, "I want you to go live your life, because I don't know what's going to happen with mine. This way, you still have a life." She started to cry. She goes, "You don't love me?" I said, "I do love you. That's why I'm giving you freedom." She goes, "No, I will never leave you." And so, the case itself came to an end, and Arne was behind bars but on a lesser charge, leaving his girlfriend and her family grieving for him. They insisted that he was innocent, not wavering even for a second. However, even though the trial and the case might be over, the story itself still's got a couple of wrinkles left to discuss. Skepticism and exploitation. Alright, now I think it's time we get to the part that Simon's been waiting for, where we put a nice dose of realism back into this story. Oh my, I've been putting a dose of realism back in throughout the script, Matt. It's me, you know? Skeptical Simon. Let's of course start with the Warrens themselves. Now, as we've already explained, all of the claims are up for debate. And the validity of all of these cases and all of the things the Warrens did are subject to skepticism. Many don't believe in ghosts, many don't believe in demons, and while in the movies the Warrens are portrayed as heroic, many have criticized them, saying that they were con artists who used these incidents for money and notoriety. No, never! Why, in 1997, Stephen Novella, an American clinical neurologist and associate professor at Yale University School of Medicine, and late American podcaster Perry DeAngelis investigated the Warrens for the New England Skeptical Society, or NESS. Yes, I like this. They agreed that the Warrens were a loving couple and pleasant people, but that they believed all their work and their claims of supernatural activity were hogwash. The Warrens were steadfast in their beliefs, with Lorraine stating that those who doubted, those who lambasted their work, they don't base anything on God. I mean, fair enough, Lorraine, but while I fully admit there are things in this world that even science can't prove, we aren't hearing much from God on the subject either. No. And it's like, do I believe that there's plenty of shit that science can't explain? Hell yes! Do I think we'll find it in the Bible or in demons or in churches? Absolutely not. We'll find it from a scientist just at some point in the future. Steve Novella and Perry DeAngelis summed up their findings thusly, to quote them. They have a ton of fish stories about evidence that got away. They're not doing good scientific investigation. They have a predetermined conclusion, which they adhere to literally and religiously. The Warrens claim to have scientific evidence which does indeed prove the existence of ghosts, which sounds like a testable claim into which we can sink our investigative teeth. What we found was a very nice couple, some genuinely sincere people, but absolutely no compelling evidence. And that brings us to the case of David's so-called possession, which really does begin to fall apart the more and more you look at it. First of all, while the family themselves tried to pass themselves off as an all-American God-fearing family, that couldn't be further from the truth. According to Carl Jr., Judy Glatzel was very controlling and a selfish woman, one who would scream and throw a tantrum like an irate toddler when she didn't get her way. And as far as being a religious household, couldn't be further from the truth. The family only started appearing that way when the Warrens arrived, just so that they could keep up appearances. And honestly, I think we can place most, if not all, of the blame for what happened solely on Judy's shoulders, but more on that in a moment. While we can't blame the Warrens for David's behavior before they arrived, it's clear that in the end they exploited David's so-called possession for all it's worth. Yeah, because the problem is the Warrens are invested in this, so if he does seem possessed, then that makes it look like possession is real, which is their whole shtick. David's an 11-year-old, so he's just going to go along with it, especially when the family are like, oh my god, he is possessed. It's just that, of course, this is how it plays out. So, let's start with what happens after the Warrens deemed David to be possessed. Remember how they stated, right in front of David, how he would most likely be acting soon enough now that a demon was inside him. Yes, I can already feel Simon rolling his eyes here, and you wouldn't be alone. Yes, say these things right in front of an 11-year-old child so they know exactly what to do. Brilliant stuff. Many still feel David's behavior afterward was just him imitating what Ed had said was meant to happen next. Yeah, of course, he's 11. And they wouldn't be alone, since Carl Jr. fully believes these things as well. He doesn't believe for a second that his brother was possessed. He believes that something else was at work. But again, we'll get to that in a moment. Carl Jr. was 15 when all of this madness was occurring, and he does not mince words about his feelings at the time, which have remained the same ever since. I didn't know what Ed and Lorraine Warren's agenda was in the beginning. I just sat back and watched, and things didn't sit right with me. They'd sit down at the kitchen table to discuss David's issues. They were saying, well, he could start cursing at you, spitting at you, he'll grunt and growl like a savage. And my concern was, why talk about the subject when we're sitting right there? Have the kids go outside, go downstairs, go do something. But they wanted to make sure, we heard it. And we did. Like you're leading them on what to do. You don't think David's smart enough to put that together? A couple of days later, David was doing just that. Word for word. Shines a nice bright light on the whole situation, doesn't it? And funny, isn't it, that David only started acting up when the Warrens were there? Right there in front of him, cameras and microphones in hand. For that first week, the Warrens showed up almost every day, and instead of trying to really help David, trying to figure out a way to stop what was happening, they were more focused on recording him and getting evidence. Now, you could say that was them building a case for the church, but if this was genuine, if this was real, how long were they supposed to let this kid suffer with this malignant entity within him? As Carl Jr. puts it, it turned into a show. Yeah, I feel like I pointed this all out earlier because it's exactly what you'd expect. It's exactly what happened here. There's no possession because possession's not real, and they're leading him down the path. Carl Jr. wasn't the only person who didn't believe in this possession malarkey, as neither did his father, Carl Sr. He simply believed that David was having a mental break. He didn't back his wife or other children in this, and he thought they were feeding into it. Carl Jr. even recalls one night in particular when Carl Sr. single-handedly ended one of David's episodes, all with some hands-on parenting. There was one incident, one evening, that my mother was screaming at David to stop it and calm down, sit down. And he was calling her everything under the sun. And all of a sudden, my father came out, and you hear slap. He goes, "Now I said to stop." And sure enough, the devil sat down and was very quiet. So I'm glad, at last, he listened to my father. Yeah, it's like, you must make all you want, but dad got a slap him in the face. Stop it.
The power of Christ compels you!
Suspicious, right? Now let's get to how it became clear as day that Judy and the Warrens exploited the story of David's possession after Arnie's murder trial was over. At first, Judy Glatzel was on the warpath. She wanted the story about David's possession to be out there for as many people to know as possible. She went on all the talk shows, she did interview after interview, and she did so with the Warrens by her side at all times. She was flown out to Hollywood with the Warrens, she stayed in lavish hotels with the Warrens, and she had dinner with TV host Dick Clark with the Warrens. Seeing a pattern here, maybe? The Warrens were feeding into Judy's need for attention and validation, stringing her along the whole way, saying that her and her family would be millionaires over all this possession drama, and the money would go towards getting Arnie out of jail, which he never did. And then, of course, there's the book, The Devil in Connecticut, which was written by Gerald Brittle with the assistance of Lorraine Warren. It was published in 1983 and tells the story of the Glatzel incident using all the evidence collected. The Glatzels met with Brittle when he came to their house and asked them to tell him what had happened. 100 hours of interviews were put on tape to make the book seem more authentic. And what was Ed Warren's comment to Brittle about how to write the book? Make it scary. Even if things ended up embellished, he wanted the book to be scary because scary sells. Yeah, there's money. There's always money. There's money behind all of this stuff. You'd think that the Glatzel family would receive a nice-sized piece of the pie in regards to the book sales, right? Well, sadly, you'd have thought wrong. Carl Jr. put it perfectly on how the Warrens screwed over his family. Quote, Ed and Lorraine Warren took over. 6 months later, the Warrens showed up with paperwork, and my mom's like, should we get a lawyer? And Lorraine's like, no, dear. William Morris Agency has a whole floor of lawyers. Yes, they do, but it's not for them. It's for you. My mother and father received $4,500, but Ed and Lorraine Warren received $81,000 and change. They're still making money off it with the Conjuring films. Well, I mean, to be fair, they did hire the person to write the book and all of that stuff. It's just your story, and if you're interviewed for the story, I don't think you... Right? They did all the work. They basically, even to the point of making it up. It almost makes me feel bad about liking the movies. I think David Glatzel said it best. Lorraine told me I was going to be, oh wait, they did tell them that they were going to be rich though. That's a little bit conniving, isn't it? Okay, that's a little bit underhanded because they led them on about being millionaires and they got $4,500. Okay, that's a bit shady. That's way more shady now thinking about it. Lorraine told me I was going to be a rich little boy from having this book deal, and that was a lie. The Warrens made a lot of money off of us. If they can profit off you, they will. They're not going to pass up that deal. Even years later, the Glatzells fought against the book, fought against the hell that the Warrens put them through. The book was republished in 2006, causing a fresh wave of crap to fall on the family. Carl Sr., who still stood fast that he never once claimed his son was possessed, even to Brittle, and Judy were long gone, so the kids, now adults, had to deal with it. David and Carl Jr. even sued the authors and the book publishers for violating their right to privacy. Lorraine defended what she and her husband did, claiming they helped the family, while Carl said they had taken advantage of his brother's mental illness and had painted him as the villain because he wouldn't play along. And so, before we close this out, I'm sure you must all be asking, well, Matt, that's dreadful and all, but earlier you said that Judy couldn't have been the cause of all of this strife. What did you mean by that? Well, let's get this sorted out right now. The theory comes from Carl Jr., and knowing what I've read and seen of Judy Glatzel, it really does come together. After his parents passed away, Carl Jr. and his wife returned to their home to go through their belongings. It was while doing so that Carl came across something suspicious, something that quickly started putting all that they had gone through into perspective. Judy had OCD and was known to make notes on everything from calendars to little scraps of paper. Carl found a note on it in Judy's handwriting, which was scribbled, well, the family had their medicine tonight and everything is good. Ooh, what does that mean? Come again? Matt's also on the same page as me. What does this mean? What's going on? It is alleged that Judy Glatzel, without her family's knowledge or consent, had been drugging their food for years, specifically with the drug Sominex. Now, Sominex is an over-the-counter sleep aid medication, easy enough to get in both the US and the UK. Judy had been giving it to the rest of her family for a very long time, always in their dinner, which she served separately from her own. Her food was always made and stored apart from the rest of the family's meals, and if any of them offered her seconds from the family's share, she would always decline. She wanted her man and her kids tired, sleepy, and easy to control. She wanted a nice, quiet house, no fuss, no muss, no problems at all. She wanted to be in control, and she wanted things done her way. Is there really drugs available over the counter that are that powerful to put people to sleep drearily? I know that melatonin is a thing these days, which you can get over the counter, which is pretty wild to me. At least in America, I don't think you can get it over the counter in Europe. But that puts people out apparently. But proper sleeping pills, you could have a prescription for that, no? Now, the thing about Sominex is that long-term use has the potential to develop side effects. What are these side effects, I hear you ask? Oh, nothing too serious, just mood swings, weight gain, euphoria, hallucinations, and psychosis. The dots are connecting, aren't they? Allegedly, Judy Glatzel, with her constant need to be in control of her household, caused her youngest son to experience a so-called possession, thus causing the terrible drama to unfold in the first place. And the same can be said about Arne. He lived with the Glatzells, he ate the same food as they did, he was under the effects of the same drugs, and it easily could have had similar effects on his mental state the night he stabbed Alan Bono to death. In the words of Carl Jr., between David, Arne, my brother Alan, they were all victims at the end of the day. Now, of course, all of this is speculation and alleged, and the other kids don't believe a wink of it, still clinging to the idea that David was possessed, but it does make you think, doesn't it? Yeah, they're just deluding themselves. Wrap up. Alright, look, before we go any further, let's take a moment to remember the victim in this case. Alan Bono didn't deserve to die that night, stabbed to death by someone he called a friend. It's his name that gets lost most of the time in this retelling, and part of me feels like we've fallen into the same trap here, in which I say I'm sorry, Alan, rest in peace. With that said, where does this leave all the participants today? Well, the Warrens are both long gone at this point. Ed Warren passed away on August the 23rd, 2006, and Lorraine followed suit on April the 18th, 2019. I wouldn't describe her as long gone. 5 years, I guess 5 years is quite a long time, but not long gone. People are going to debate their work till the end of time, whether they were real or fake, but their names will continue to be spoken even if they're long gone. The Conjuring films have been a huge success, some of the best horror films in recent history, and while I'd like to picture the Warrens as these good and heroic people, the movie bias is out of the window when I see the underhanded things they did. As Carl Jr. said rather well, they were good at what they did, and they knew how to talk to people, and they knew how to play people. They were very good con people. Yeah, Carl Jr. and I, same page. The Glatzel brothers are rather scattered these days, thrown to the wind after the terrible ordeals that they'd gone through, each affected in their own ways by the insanity of the possession episode and the involvement of the Warrens. They are also victims of the whole thing, and it isn't fair what they had to go through, both at the hands of their mum and at the Warrens. Judy and Carl Sr. have long since passed, as did Debbie, but she never wavered in her love or support of Arne. She stuck with him till the end. I've always said it from the beginning. Arne's innocent. He's been to hell and back. Speaking of which, whatever happened to Arne? Well, in 1985, he and Debbie tied the knot while he was behind bars during a small ceremony with the family. And then 1 year later, in 1986, only 5 years after being sentenced 10 to 20, Arne Johnson was released in full for good behavior, a free man once more. He and Debbie stayed together for the rest of her life until she passed, and from all accounts, they believed all that had happened was real, and they remained happily together until the end. Even to this day, Arne has been affected by the events all those years ago, but he maintains his story and says he's a better man for it. Quote, "This whole thing changed my life, brought me more to religion. I'm not possessed. I never had an exorcism, but I'm not possessed. And I know how to protect myself. I know what prayers to say. So I'm very much in control. My faith keeps me strong. So everything seems fine. Life is moving forward." And that, as they say, is that. The casual criminalist Halloween spectacular has come to a close, maybe if it was published on time, and it feels like a tragedy overall. A family torn apart, from both outside and from within. A little boy manipulated into thinking he had a demon inside his head, and a man who lost his life at the hands of a man just as easily manipulated and drugged as the rest of the family. Pretty scary shit, isn't it? Happy Halloween, everybody. Yes, and that's where we end today's episode. Thank you for being here.